Hello and welcome to Queerful. I'm your host, Benjamin Rose, and today I am joined by drag performer Blair Which. Hello and welcome. This is Queerful episode 3. You have stumbled onto a podcast where I explore the ways that LGBTQ plus folks of all stripes create social change, challenge power structures, invert binaries, and thrive in a heteropatriarchal world, and also in a pandemic-cursed world. So each week I am joined by someone that I find interesting, and we just sort of chat about the work that they do, who they are, things that they have learned about themselves recently. And this week's guest is drag performer Blair Which. That's Witch with an H, W-H-I-C-H. And Blair is a drag performer in the East Coast by way of California. And they perform very androgynous or sort of gender-bending type of drag. They describe themselves as a bipolar gender mess. You never know which you're going to get. So they do some drag king-inspired performance looks, they do some drag queen-inspired looks, they do some androgynous looks, and so they're really exploring drag as an art form in all of its various gender expressions, in all of its various genres. They're also the host of an online show that we're going to talk about later. You'll hear more about that. Before we jump into this conversation between Blair and myself, let me give you a little bit of context. Blair and I met because we were both part of the same online drag competition this past spring. For those who may not know, I do dabble in the art of drag myself in my free time under the name Inversia. I'm also very much a gender-bending persona. So at the beginning of lockdown, I had applied to be part of this online drag competition. It was being hosted by Clive Max, who is a drag king from California, and he was hosting it on Instagram. So me and Blair had both applied to be one of the contestants, and we both were. We were 2 out of the 8 contestants of that show. Every week we submitted photo shoots or videos or impersonations, whatever the challenge called for that week. And then every week one person was sent home until it was the final 2, which happened to be Blair and myself. Blair did end up taking home the crown because they are a fantastic, creative, amazing performer. So they are currently the winner of season 1 of Max Drag, which is what the competition was called. So that is how Blair and I got to know each other, is we were both part of this competition week after week. It was, I think, 7 weeks long. So we got to know each other a little bit as we were both doing that. Another piece of context that I wanted to give you is that Blair talks about being an Afab performer, and if you're not familiar with that acronym, it just means assigned female at birth. You can contrast that to AMAB, which would be assigned male at birth. It's a way to talk about the ways that people are assigned gender by a doctor when you're born, but that may not always reflect your actual gender identity as you're an adult. And so if you're not familiar with that acronym, I just wanted to give you some context as that comes up quite a few times. I also just want to give a brief content warning that we do talk about mental health a lot in the second half of the episode. Nothing too graphic, but we do talk about depression, how we're dealing with a pandemic and things like that. So if that's something that you would rather avoid or just be prepared for, know that that conversation comes up near the end of this interview. And lastly, I do want to have a content warning that there is some quote-unquote adult language in this episode. So if that is something that you are concerned about, just be prepared that it is not filtered. We're having a very real conversation between 2 friends. So just be warned about that as well. With that, I think that you are primed and ready to hear what Blair has to share about their experience as a drag performer, a drag host, as a person living through a pandemic. And I'm so excited for you to hear a bit about them and hear their story. Welcome to Queerful. I am so excited. I am here with Blair Which. Blair, what would you like the people to know about yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Oh boy. Well, I identify primarily as a drag thing. I do drag king performances, drag queen performances, and everything in between. Gender fuckery is my sweet spot. So, and I'm trying to use my platform on a show that I've created called The Witching Hour. I want to bring some attention to some issues within the drag and queer community. I want to bring more attention to mental health. So if you ever just want to see a bunch of queerful individuals having a conversation about some real stuff and watching some amazing art, feel free to watch the show. It's every second and fourth Wednesday on my Twitch channel. It's twitch.tv/Blair Which Official.
Yes, it's so good. Yeah, I wish like more shows would do that kind of thing. Like it just really is a cool idea, like having drag like performances that you can watch, but also then like having conversations, because like, we all have thoughts and experiences that other people can learn from, or that we can at least find solidarity in. So like, I know that doesn't happen at in-person shows because everyone is like drunk and
Yeah.
and there to have a good time, which is also fine. But
yeah,
but it's just cool. It's a cool like different way of doing a show that I think is awesome. So
I appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah. So for people who are listening whose only familiarity with drag is like watching TV, what is a drag thing? And maybe like, I know you mentioned that a little bit, like with the gender fuckery thing, but how did you maybe first come into that language and like discover what that is?
That is a good question. When I first dove into drag, my understanding of it was that I, as an Afab individual, could basically only be a drag king. So I initially started being basically your on-the-nose, stereotypical drag king, doing like, your hip-hop numbers and your fly little outfits and ripping your shirt off and stuff, and having, wearing big old strap-ons and shit,
As one does.
Right, and I'm not gonna lie, I still do that on occasion, so that's fine. I'm not putting down that particular form of kingery, but that's literally all I thought that I could do. And as I spent a little bit more time in the community and met some Afab queens, I started diving into the drag queen persona. But then, because of the way everything is in the community, I thought that I had to differentiate my male and my female persona. So I had my drag king side, that was Clint Taurus, and then I had my femme side, which was Areola Grande. And then I did a little bit of time, in those two personas. And then honestly, out of sheer laziness, I was trying to figure out a way to have like an extremely androgynous name, so that way I could present in whatever way I wanted to present. So that's where Blair Which was born. And then when I injured my leg, that's a dead horse beaten to death. Everybody knows that story. And I moved from California over to the East Coast, up in New Hampshire. And as I rehabilitated a little bit, I went back into the drag scene. But again, I felt like it was going to be easier for me to skirt into a new community if I was a straight up drag king. So I did go back to Clint Taurus for a little bit when I first started. But then I went to a show at Machine in Boston. And that was the first time I ever saw a drag thing. And basically, a drag thing is an artist who really just doesn't conform to the binary. They're going to, present themselves this way one day and a completely different way the next day, or maybe just slightly different on another day. And that's kind of why the name Blair Which worked out into play, because you never know which you're going to get. I was like, that makes branding super easy.
True. It's so good.
But yeah, I mean, Blair, like the whole drag thing identity didn't really fall into place for me until the last, almost year, because my 1 year anniversary of performing on the East Coast is next month. And like I said, like it was only within the last almost year that a drag thing was even how I identified. And even when I first started Blair Witch, like I would just do he, him pronouns when I was male presenting and she, her pronouns when I was female presenting. And then I just felt more comfortable at one point just going by they, them, because it just felt more right when I was in drag, because because I said gender fuckery is kind of my sweet spot. Basically, gender fuck is anything from just kind of natural androgyny all the way up to like femme drag queens or femme drag kings and bearded queens and all of that stuff just kind of thrown into a melting pot and thrown onto somebody's face. That's basically, that's basically what the gender fuck is. And one of the biggest things with people who only see drag on TV is that you only see the extreme, like it's a male being a female and that's it. And all they're meant to do is be pretty and have some pretty clothes on and be able to walk in heels and do some death drops and shit. That's what drag is. But really, honestly, like it is so much more than that.
Yeah, I like how you explain that. I didn't come across the actual like phrase of like drag thing of people identifying that way before like following people on Instagram. Like that's not really something folks around here say in our scene. So I always just like have introduced myself as like a drag performer, like drag artist, and like just staying away from gendered terms. And people will just sort of like do that little thing. They're like, what do you mean? you know? And it's just the like, what are you, but are you a boy or a girl? And
doesn't matter.
It's just like, and it's wild to me because especially with drag, like you're already putting pounds of makeup on your face regardless of like what the look is. So I love people who can embrace sort of the both and and there's nothing wrong with like hyper performing a gender. Like if you want to be hyper masculine, you do you, boo, that's amazing. Like, but
I've seen some hyper masculine drag kings that leave me pretty thirsty, so like
absolutely keep doing it. Keep doing that.
Right, keep doing you, boo boo.
Right, but like the actual like a beard doesn't have to be inherently feminine or masculine. I've seen some dope glitter beards on people of all genders and like like we don't have to gender those things. Like it's drag. Yeah, the only like thing that the only time I'll ever quote RuPaul is saying like really like you're born naked and the rest is drag. Like that's really true. Like anything you do in terms of gender presentation is like you're making it up. It doesn't have to mean anything, or it can mean everything. That's
deep.
Yeah.
I support that.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so it's cool like seeing people just embrace that, like
well, I definitely wish that we were just in a world where you didn't have to have the tagline of the gender based, like it doesn't have to be drag queen, drag king, like drag thing or drag creature or drag whatever. Like we are all drag performers,
right?
We're all drag artists, and I don't understand why it still matters what somebody's genitals are for how they're performing.
Yeah, right. Well, and that's like a parallel to just life in general, right? Like drag leading the way, and just like that's, to me, I feel like drag should be a way to like lead people forward and show like a vision of a gender, not a gender free, but just like a world where you can express however you want to express, and if we can't even do that in drag, like we still have a ways to go before we can do that just in like people's everyday lives, but we're getting there.
Slowly. But we trying up in here. Like.
We are trying.
It's a slow grind, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah. So on that topic of like gender expression, have you found that like being Blair Witch or like doing drag has helped you like understand like yourself as a person in any specific ways?
I want to like I originally started drag because while I was living out in California, I was watching drag in a place that was extremely body positive, and being an audience member and seeing these big girls coming out there having a good ass time, not giving a fuck, and the audience just eating that shit up. I was just like, I feel like, if I were to do something like that because of the way my body is, like, I wouldn't get that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, you know what? I'm going to try this and I'm going to fucking go for it. Like, I'm going to jump in head first and I'm going to see if I can fucking learn to love the skin sack that I came in.
Yeah.
And I definitely don't think that I'm completely done with that journey. But I would definitely like to say that being Blair Witch and the whole journey through that has helped me understand Cynthia a little bit more. For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. So I was gonna ask you, I know that you have been doing a lot of digital drag and a lot of folks have, which has its pros and cons. I know I don't know who all is gonna be listening to this, but there are probably gonna be people who are not super familiar with drag and have not been to a lot of drag shows, so might be like, oh, this is a good time to check out drag, because you can just watch it on your computer.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, but so yeah, first of all, that like you can totally check out drag without the intimidation of like going to a drag show, because that can be scary sometimes.
Well, yeah, especially because a lot of the time drag is portrayed as something that's like you're gonna have some man with fake boobs come up and try to grope you or some shit. Like,
Yeah, which like admittedly the first drag show I ever went to in person did leave a bad taste in my mouth for a little while, because the first show I went to I saw Sharon Needles, and
yeah,
I wasn't a huge fan of the show, and it wasn't just her, but like just the whole night was like associated with other non-related things too. And so then I was like, I was scared to go to drag shows after that. And then after that I met folks from Madison, where I live now, and they had like an outdoor patio show that was like the complete opposite, whereas like in the middle of the afternoon, and it was super low key, and I was like, oh, this is also drag. Okay.
like I can handle this.
Yeah, I was like, you're not scary.
You're my people.
Yeah. Anyways, but on the other side of the screen, what is it like doing digital drag? And we were both in a competition and did digital drag in a competition format too, which is extra stressful. But video recording, editing, all of those new skills it takes to be a drag performer. What has been your experience of that?
Well, it's definitely a blessing and a curse because you do get the creative freedom to do some things via video that you are unable to do on a stage necessarily. So there's been some fun creative perks as far as that goes. But then, I feel like the biggest stress from the digital age kind of comes from not saying that it's all a competition, but it's basically a competition. Like, a lot of people feel extremely uneasy about even trying to enter the drag world because they don't have a green screen, or because they don't have over the top backdrops and accessories and all of this other stuff, or a really powerful computer that you can have 15 editing softwares on. Right. And, all of this shit. And I, even though I'm stubborn, I'm a Taurus, like I keep fucking doing it, but there are many shows that I'm still in to this day that I watch, and I just feel so out of place because I don't possess those skills to edit videos in that way. But it's just kind of learning to come to terms with the art that you're capable of putting out versus the pipe dream. Because if you live toward that, like, presently, like, if you just acknowledge that it's presently unattainable,
Yeah.
like, you ignore, like, it's not necessarily off the table forever for you, but right now it's just off the table. So if you allow yourself to take the focus and the worry off that and just keep your focus toward what you're able to put out, then that stress kind of reduces. I'm definitely no pro at this piece of advice. I'm still working on it myself, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely made me learn a lot about myself as a video editor and creator. I've definitely learned that I am not allowed to touch editing software after I take my sleepy time medicine. It doesn't end well. But you know, I think it's been cool. It's been a learning experience. I mean, if the whole digital thing keeps going on for a little while, I feel like I might be able to hold my own a little bit, but I'm definitely looking forward to a stage again at some point.
Yeah.
Regardless of how great digital's been.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not the same as like being with people and feeding, like,
feeling that energy and like feeding off it, like, just need it.
Yeah. When there's like a whole bunch of people in a room, it doesn't even have to be like a huge number of people in a room, but just like sort of being with other people. Like, yeah, there's an aura that you can like absorb and build up the vibes. But you know, making videos is good too, and like it's fun to watch folks. I have enjoyed like being able to watch drag from folks that I've like been following for a while, but like live across the country. So
that's been really cool.
Like, I wouldn't have been able to watch them perform otherwise. So that is a cool thing.
I mean, it's not bad getting to watch shows with like all of the people on the drag TV shows that you like to see.
Yeah.
I'm definitely more of a, you know, pro Dragula person myself, but you know, RuPaul was my thing once upon a time too, before I knew better.
Oh yeah, it's the journey we go through. So talking about the drag community, sort of a nebulous concept, but like the world of drag, you talked about like starting out seeing other people performing and like thinking about like, could I do that? You know, like imagining yourself in those shoes. We had a really good conversation in one of your Witching Hour shows about doing drag from a quote unquote non-normative, I guess, place where you're not the high femme, like, especially like white twink person doing drag, which like there are wonderful drag queens who fit that description, right? But then there's everybody else who doesn't necessarily fit that description, trying to make kind of a space for their art as well. So what would you say, whether from your own experience or from also like stories and experience you've had from other people, what are some of those challenges of like carving out space in the drag world for everybody?
Well, I kind of feel like what I'm about to say is, to most of us who have been in the drag community for a little while or who have eyes, you know, it's going to sound kind of like I'm beating a dead horse here, but one of the biggest problems is the expectations created by things like RuPaul's Drag Race. Because when you watch that show, you just expect to see a bunch of dudes wearing dresses, being surprisingly fucking beautiful, with these amazing garments and giving you these high quality choreographed performances and throwing wigs and doing all this stuff, you know. So they watch that and then go to a drag show. Like, if they had only ever watched RuPaul and then went to a drag show in Boston, I think they probably would have left. Like, Because, like, I remember when I walked in to my first show there in Boston, I had come in at the end of one of Violencia's performances, and she was had like full face prosthetics on. It looked like this crazy like World of Warcraft ogre. It was sickening. And the next thing I knew, the lights went out and the black light turned on, and this drag queen named Coleslaw came out like covered in like neon clothing, and then she had like a little slave boy on stage where she was grabbing neon paint and painting herself like throughout. It was ridiculous. It was crazy, and it just got even crazier from there. So like, I think it's stuff like RuPaul just setting the incorrect tone for what drag is. And then, you know, there's the inherent ableism and misogyny in the drag community. Like if you're physically incapable of doing a death drop or doing knee slides or doing splits or what have you, then, you know, what are you even doing drag for at that point? If you can't do that, what's the point? Like, drag is so much more than just death drops and garments, and like, it's people's expression. It's an artistic expression. So any drag performer will tell you that the best audience that they've ever experienced is an audience who has no expectations. Yeah. The only thing that audience wants is to be entertained.
Right.
Those are always the most fun shows, or like just when they're receptive, like they give you that energy that you're looking for. They, you know, it's kind of like the Lady Gaga applause song, or like we're all like Tinkerbell, where we're just like, clap for me, bitches, like let's go. But there is a lot of reasons why it's so hard as an alternate performer to have that space, because of the expectations that are set upon drag by other people.
Yeah.
So basically, once we figure out how to tear down those barriers and be a little bit more welcoming to Afab performers, to trans performers, to differently abled performers, like I have gone to some shows where, you know, I've seen some differently abled people like move me in their performance in ways that some bitch who's just doing splits could never.
Yeah.
Could never touch me like that, you know?
Right.
And I don't mean to say anything bad about like the hyperfemme dancing queens, because I still watch them and throw my money at them too.
Right.
So I don't mean to say anything bad by it, but like that's just the only part of drag that most people know, you know?
Right. And if you come, like you said, with that expectation that that's what you're going to see, and then you see, you know, people coming out that's like, you see a drag king with a glitter beard coming out, and they're like doing this like spooky like storytelling number.
Me.
Right. And then, you know, on top of that, when you have like hosts that like misgender people when they come out, or just like there's just this whole culture that contributes to then these expectations, and you're like, what am I watching? And you know, and then like you miss out on amazing art.
Yeah, basically, because you just kind of, when you close your mind off to those kind of possibilities, you don't even know how somebody could have contributed to your show, like in positive ways, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. But then there's the other side of the coin where, you know, like I've seen situations where some people are hesitant to work with Afab performers because apparently we're more dramatic. We have a lot of drama. And I'm like, oh, because we all have vaginas, so we're dramatic. I will admit, some of us are fucking dramatic.
Right, but like,
so are some of them. Like,
yeah. Yeah.
It's almost an expectation from someone in the community to be kind of dramatic. Like,
that's true.
We're entertainers. We got to be at least a little bit boisterous and
right.
and big with our personas. So we're gonna piss somebody off.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. At that point, it's like, that's not about drag. That's just misogyny.
Yeah.
Like,
But that's, one of the biggest issues is a lot of, cis queens are still saying, like, the only thing drag kings are good for is taking their clothes off. And, like, if you, aren't going to go out there and strip, then, like, what are you even here for? Or if you're somebody like myself or like you or like Gareth Gorgeous or just anybody who's, like, really like elaborate and like story driven with some of their performances that are kind of like head scratchers.
yeah.
And they just kind of come at you like, why can't you do something normal? Like, what you're missing is that this is normal.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Welcome to my mind. Like, hello.
Yeah, this is completely normal. What do you mean?
This is the regular. Like, this is it.
Yeah.
This is what you signed up for.
Yeah. And like, it's entertaining to watch someone come out and perform a Lady Gaga number with like an amazing dance and doing death drops. But if that's like
Hell yeah.
if that's the only thing I saw, then like,
I would be disappointed.
Yeah, then it like loses some of its charm. Like you said, like there are some people who are like cis performers who are dancing queens and absolutely amazing at that. But if everyone was that, like that just seems like a basic principle to me. Like if everyone did the same thing, you're missing out on what a lot of people have to offer.
Basically, and like that's to go back to the whole digital question. Mike Hawk, Seacoast performer from out here, basically said like with the digital age, like if you're not booking differently abled individuals, if you're not booking POC individuals, if you're not booking Afab performers, like if you're not booking people from those different categories, you don't have those excuses anymore of travel or what have you. So the good thing about it is it's kind of putting those specific producers on blast. Like,
True.
I don't give a fuck about this. I'm just going to keep doing like my pretty pageant drag and like taking people's tips and shit. But fuck everything else that's going on in the world.
Yeah.
So people show their real colors.
True. I know, when all you need to be in a show is an internet connection, it's like you can book people from anywhere. So
anywhere.
Yeah, you can't use that excuse.
Like, and that's like one of the, like when I was first coming up with the concept for my show, I wanted to initially have it where like nobody on the panel was from the same place. So that way, like, it was always like completely different opinions at every single panel. But then I realized how difficult casting a show was, and learned that wasn't really possible. I gave up on that quickly, but it's always part of the intention to be diverse with whoever's on the show. Like, had people from, Australia and other sides of the country, and we just had somebody from Portugal. Like, digital world opens it up. Stop being a freaking hater and put some melanin in your show.
There it is. That's the quote.
Not that hard, people.
Yeah. So something that I know that you are a big advocate for, which is especially important right now, is mental health and just being aware of your mental health and taking care of yourself. So is there anything that you have learned about yourself and learned about mental health in these past, 6-7 months, that you would like to share?
How long you got? Like, fuck. I guess some of the highlights, one of the biggest things that has come out of quarantine for me is being a very stubborn individual. I really didn't want to have to rely on medication to function. So over the last couple of years, I've gone unmedicated, and I've been kind of skating by, you know, and I got to a point where I just didn't want to feel like I was just existing anymore, and I got really, really, really depressed, and had to admit to myself that I couldn't do it alone anymore. And I'm still struggling to find a psychiatrist. However, my primary care doctor was able to give me like a temporary prescription, and I definitely don't think it's the right combo for me, but there are some spaces for relief where I'm like, all right, like I can probably at least swing this rather than how I was feeling before. And then I've just really learned that when I'm depressed, I'm kind of just a giant sloth. Like, and it is literally the worst feeling to like know that there's so much stuff you're supposed to fucking be doing, but literally the only thing you want to do is throw yourself in bed or throw yourself on the couch and watch garbage TV or play video games or just do something that makes you have to feel like your brain is doing nothing. So I've had to learn some ways to kind of pull myself out of those habits. So I've kind of started it within the last week or so, but I basically like plan out an entire week in advance, like a checklist of absolutely everything I need to get done every single day of that week. And that's kind of the only way I've been staying on task. Because my depression, you know, it's coming back, you know, and I was getting to the point where I was cutting it really close for deadlines and falling behind on stuff and having to reschedule things. And, you know, like it is just really, it put me in a bad place. And because of the situation that I'm in financially, I can't really afford to let myself be that depressed sloth. So it's just forced me to learn ways to keep myself on task, which is something I probably should have learned a long time ago. But here we are. You're never too old to learn new tricks.
True. Yeah. No, I mean, it's an ongoing process. Like, I'm going to kick myself because I can't remember what I was just reading. But I remember I remember this part of it, but I was reading something that was just talking about how like you have a relationship with your body, and like that I know what it was. It was an article, and I think it was written by JP Brammer, but I will check that. But anyways, it was about it was like an advice column thing, and someone wrote in, was like, how do I learn to love myself? And they responded with this like really profound way of looking at it. Like, loving yourself is not this like destination. Like, loving yourself isn't something that you like figure out how to do and then you're there. Like, loving yourself is this ongoing relationship with your body where like sometimes, like with any relationship, you have high patches and you have low patches and you have fights and you have miscommunications and you have times where you're really like in sync. And I was like, that's such a good way to look at it, because like no one is ever there 100%. Like, our bodies and our minds like betray us sometimes, but then there's also times when they're good to us. So it's like, you just got to learn your body. At least that's what I'm like recognizing, is just like learning that it's like, you know what? Yeah, sometimes my brain does me dirty. And, you know, I just have learned that. But that's not like the end all be all. It's like an ongoing relationship. So I'm like, okay, how can we avoid this next time, brain? Like, what are we going to do differently?
I feel that really deeply, because like sometimes when I get super depressed, like it gets really hard to like differentiate what I call the dark voices from like my actual real me thoughts. Mm-hmm. And that's probably the hardest part. Like, and I've had to learn how to see the behaviors that lead up to that. so that way I can stop myself before I get there. And that's been one of the most fun journeys for me, because those different things for me are physical body responses. Like, I can feel my body change when I'm manic. I can feel the change when I'm starting to like dissociate and go into my head and watch my head movies, as I call them.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've learned just so much, like, about identifying those behaviors. Still working on the coping skills that come after that.
Right.
We can at least identify, bitch. Like,
yeah, but like naming it is the first step. That's a big thing. So that's, yeah, I'm in that boat too. Just like learning how to recognize those things that your body is doing. You know, I don't think that's something I was ever really taught, you know, like during, especially like adolescence, when I feel like it's really important. When your body is really going through changes. I mean, your body is always changing, but like now I'm like, this is such valuable advice that I've learned, is to that, like, your body tells you things, like your body contains information about you, and you should listen to it because it knows what it's talking about. So
yeah, I completely agree. And like, there are definitely, you know, some other situations in which I, you know, could have listened to my body and didn't. So, you know, you live and you learn.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's like, I feel that too. Like that's a big deal. So to move back to something on a little lighter note, I just curious, like, what your dreams are for Blair Witch moving forward. And I know we are still in the middle of a pandemic that we don't know how long it will last for, but like, not taking that into too much of account, but like, if you could do anything, where would you want Blair Witch to go in a year or 3 years or however long?
I mean, my extremely long-term goal is to open my own venue that I want to have different kinds of like themed nights, and I want some of them to be safe spaces for sober queers.
Yes.
And of course, you know, money from a place like that is going to come from the club night, so we gonna have some of those too.
Yeah.
But, you know, still want to give some, you know, somewhere one day a week at least where they can go have a good time at night that isn't like dripping with booze everywhere.
Yeah.
A little bit more short term, I would just like to find some sponsorship for the witching hour, so that way I can actually start paying people. Because, you know, my current highest paid evening was $9 a person. Like, and I feel like a lot of people in the club would have thought that was a dry night. Like, you know, so,
yeah.
And, you know, they take the time to get in drag a second time, you know, outside of making a video, and have this conversation with me and get really vulnerable and open and honest. And I feel like I value the fact that they do that, and it does drive me a little nuts that I can't pay them. But like, I can barely pay my own rent, so you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So a bitch needs some help. But, you know, post-pandemic, like literally right as everything shut down, I was working on getting my own weekly show at a venue in my town. So if things kind of, at post-pandemic situations, I would like to try to pursue having that happen again.
Yeah.
And after experiencing trying to do the witching hour every single week, I definitely would try to find a co-host so we could alternate weeks. But yeah, I mean, I want to keep the witching hour going. I want to keep the conversation about mental health going. I want to find some sponsorship for the show so that way I can help support these artists in a financial way, as well as giving them space on my platform. And if I can figure out how to make some buku bucks, I want to make a queer space, for everyone, whether it's, whether you're sober, whether you want to come get shit-faced and have a good time, whether you want to see pageanty queens, whether you want to watch bitches eat fire and drink blood to metal music, we're gonna have nights for everybody. So,
I want all of those things.
One day.
That would be so cool. And like, I'm glad you named that too, because there aren't very many like sober queer spaces. Like, so much of queer life is built around nightlife and bars, which has a really beautiful history, but like it also doesn't create space for the sober queers.
But it also kind of enables some of the bigger problems within the queer community.
True.
So it's like this weird
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not gonna stop going to perform at a club, so don't misunderstand.
Right.
I'll still be there.
I will be there.
But I really I'll have my one drink, and I can't, because if I have more than one drink, I probably won't even perform, because I'm gonna be like, what? I don't drink anymore. So
yeah.
Even the one I'm like, all right, let's go. Blair in the fucking house, So I really stay away from it at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never been that, but especially now that I've been in quarantine, I did in the first month or two, I had red wine always on the counter, but now I'm I haven't really drank.
I mean, I drank a lot at the beginning of quarantine too, but
yeah.
It gets old,
Right. You're like, well, now what? You get wine drunk and you're sitting on the couch and you're like, cool.
Yeah. What else now?
Yeah.
What's next? And then you realize there's nothing, and you're like, oh.
Yeah, this took away the magic a little bit.
I have been disillusioned.
So one last question is, what is your favorite performance, or a few of your favorite performance, because that's hard, performances that you've done during this digital drag age?
Oh, during quarantine.
Yeah.
I would probably have to say at least one of them is in the house, the duplex that I live in, there's a shed in the backyard, and the shed has an attic in the basement too. And the basement's a creepy basement, so I went down there as a bloody ass clown and performed Psychosocial by Slipknot. So that one's definitely one of my favorite ones. And then I would probably have to say another one that I did was I tried to do a manifestation of depression. So I had this makeup look where it was supposed to look like shattered glass around one eye and the bottom of my mouth, and then the other eye was just covered in blue and streaming tears and stuff like that. And then you can tell that I was a 90s little grunge metal kid, because that one was a Korn song. So yeah, I did Falling Away From Me. And then if I could pick one more, it'll probably be the one that I worked on most recently. That was for the show Full Spin with Magenta with a J. And we did the album from Florence and the Machine, Lungs. Because the way the show works is she picks an album, and then it's nonstop, you're just playing through the whole album, but it's everybody's performances. And I did the song Between Two Lungs. And then I did a really glammed up femme face for one side of it, And then the other side of it was basically the same face, but like running black tears and smudgy lips, and then I had like on the clean side I had this like iridescent shawl, and then for the other one I had a black one. So it was like the opposing forces, like the between the happy and the sad. And then like in the middle, I had some footage of me like doing some like silk fan stuff. And I like forced myself to learn some new editing techniques to make that one. So I'm definitely going to say that one just because I'm proud of the work that I put into it.
Nice. Yeah. They're like bloody clown. Oh my God. I love it. we love a bloody clown.
Well, I've been, you know, doing a lot more clowns lately. So I'm just kind of like, all right, Blair, like, are you trying to tell me? Like, because sometimes when I sit down to do a face, I literally just let my hands take me where they want to go.
Yeah.
So when I, you know, finish the look and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, what is happening in there? Like, what's going on? Do we need to talk? Do we need to check in? Like,
yeah, that's my favorite, is when you just sit down, you don't like have necessarily a roadmap, and you're just like, let's see what happens. I'm going to put some colors on my face.
That's basically Blair's entire aesthetic. It's like, let's just sit down and see what happens. So
I love it. It works.
I mean, it's worked for me sometimes, and then other times it has not. So I did not have the same luck in the second competition I was in. So
fair enough.
Yeah. It was really funny with that though, because like hella people were expecting me to be like literally destroyed about it. And I was like, no, I mean, I feel like they were nice with their critiques. Like, they could have probably been harsher if they really wanted to, but they still chose to be respectful. And I knew going into it that, like, my drag's not for everybody.
Yeah.
So I can't, you know, if I let myself get down about that, then I wouldn't be able to keep continuing all the other stuff that I'm doing. And I, you know, I'm already struggling with depression as is. So I have to spend a lot of my energy trying to control my mindset. So that way I don't slip into those old, slippery, sad time behaviors.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest part about becoming aware, is like once you start to see that shit, you're like, no.
Yeah.
You just find yourself kind of just being like, be gone, Satan. And sometimes it works, but sometimes it comes back harder, and it's because it's like, fuck off, bitch. You're gonna be sad today.
Right. Your relationship, right, with your body is a relationship, and sometimes the relationship is like completely telenovela, just like a drama.
Yeah. And that's like, that's a funny thing for me too, because like whenever I'm like retelling a story or I'm impersonating somebody, I always make them extremely aggressive. So unpack that one. But we don't have to unpack that right now. But something to think about.
The things you notice when you're paying attention, and you're like, huh.
That's weird. And then like, because of the way my brain works, I have to sit there and be like, why do I do that? I have to know why. And that's one of the most frustrating things. Especially if you can't find out the why.
Yeah.
Because then you obsess about, well, I can't say you, but like, I can't speak for everybody. I'll speak for myself, but I obsess about it if I can't figure out the why.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would like to leave as a last bit of advice or encouragement or anything to anyone that's listening?
If you are listening to this and you are listening because you wanted to hear a voice or just let yourself know, or just kind of like look for companionship and know that you aren't alone in the world, that's the one thing you should take away from this conversation, is you are not alone. There are people out there who know exactly how you're feeling, and 9 times out of 10, a lot of us are probably more willing to talk about it than we should be. We are here in your corner to support you, and you've got a family here waiting for you. All you have to do is, put your arm out and we'll come and grab you. So remember that you are loved and you are valued and you are beautiful, no matter what anybody says to you. And also tune into the Witching Hour on every second and fourth Wednesday.
No, for real. Yeah, you should watch Blair's show because it's so good. And also you will hear more about that, like talking about mental health and recognizing that, first of all, everyone deals with mental health struggles in one way or another at some point in their life. But second of all, especially as queer people, especially as people in a pandemic, like there's layers on that. So like everybody has some way that they can relate, if you're going through a tough time. So
yeah,
it's real. People don't always share that, but like you said, there are a lot of people who will overshare that if you just ask us. So
basically, a lot of us are open books. Just don't be scared, boo.
Yeah.
Hit us up.
Absolutely. Well, with that, then I will leave you. Thank you for listening to this conversation, and we'll be right back. Thank you for listening to this episode of Queerful. It was a ton of fun to catch up with my friend Blair. We had a lot of laughs. It was good hearing their perspective on a lot of things. And I hope that it was an encouragement to you as well, to know that there are people who are waiting to hold you up, waiting to lift you up during these times that are incredibly stressful, incredibly full of trauma triggers and all of these things. So know that that community is the way we will get through this. And I'm so grateful for people like Blair who are facilitating conversations about this, particularly in the drag world, through online platforms, in whatever way we can. And so I'm really grateful that we got to hear from Blair on that. If you want to hear more from Blair and keep up with all of the things that they're doing, which they are doing a lot of online shows right now, you can find their Instagram at Blair_Witch official. They're on TikTok as at Blair Which, and they're on Twitch as Blair Witch official. And remember, that is Witch with an H. So you can go find their shows. You can find posters that they always are posting on Instagram of different ways you can watch all the shows that they're in. So you should definitely check that out. If you want to follow me, you can find me on all the platforms as Mix Benjamin Rose, MX Benjamin Rose, website, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. I don't have TikTok, but I have pretty much all of the other things. So you can find me that way. If you want to find out more about this episode, any of the things that we name dropped in this episode, I always post episode notes on my website. If you go to mixbenjaminrose.com/podcast, you can find episode notes for all of Queerful. If you enjoyed this episode, please, on whatever platform you're listening, give it a follow or a subscribe or a rating or a review, whichever is applicable. It really helps keep this podcast going, get it to more ears, and allows me to keep having conversations with really cool people like Blair. Thanks so much for sticking with me, and I will catch you on the next one. Until then, Kay, love you, bye!